Hey guys, welcome back to the Joe Silverback Show. I'm your host, Joe Bunton, and this is part one of the role of the individual versus the group. The role of the individual versus the group. And one of the things that I want to bring to all of us, to remind myself and all of us, is that we are bombarded with all kinds of negative associations as group identity. And group identity it can be a very, very powerfully beautiful thing to identify my friend Tom with his Italian, Sicilian, New York, Roman Catholic father's family genetic background. Can be an incredible thing for Tom Ventimiglia to go back to Italy and to cross over at a place called Ventimiglia, which means 20 miles from the border of France, and go back down south and cross over the channel and into Sicily. It may be incredible for Tom to have had the seeds and the plants of basil plants from Sicily come to New York, from New York come out west to the West Coast, and be able to pass that down to friends and family for generation upon generation. That's an incredible group identity association. Somebody may come to Tom one day and say, hey, yeah, but did you know that the mafia down in Sicily, where your father grew up, did X, Y, and Z, and that the Roman Pope that you go to Catholic Church and worship did, such and such back in such and such a day. What I want everybody to do is understand that the Silverback principle is about individuation, self-individuation. Self-individuation is about honoring and respecting our parents. It's honoring and respecting those who brought us into this world. And it's about taking full responsibility for our own individuation process. In other words, what we become as individuals. And my mentor did something very wise, and that was that he made me study great human beings. And in the study of great human beings, I came to digest that throughout every epoch of civilization where major disasters had occurred, tragedies had occurred, criminal behavior had occurred, mob mentality had occurred. There was also simultaneously human individuals who put their lives on the line for other people's benefit without any thought of recompense for themselves. And that is the human being's social nature. Social nature, meaning that in a drop of a dime, we can collectively destroy anybody whose particular ideology we don't feel fits with ours. And social animal behavior, where we can help out another human being who is nothing like us, and there's nothing else that we're doing other than helping out. So what I want to point out today is two individuals who come to my mind. One I've already spoken about, Albert Schweitzer, who received the Nobel Peace Prize, I think in 1954, whose book Reverence for Life has been translated into numerous languages. Reverence for Life and his philosophy was his attempt when he went down into equatorial Africa and he was on a riverboat, and my guess is, and connected with nature, he like I and lots of people who, E.O. Wilson, who connected to something in the wholeness of the natural world that makes us associate with, which that young guy David said to me when we were filming down in the canyons. I feel complete here. And this universal ethics that Schweitzer wrote about and felt, philosophers have been looking for a unifying field theory to tie together, historians and philosophers, the unity of life. I have expressed to you one of my heroes, E.O. Wilson's unified field theory in consilience and biophilia. Biophilia being the love of living things, the love of life, this connection of ours to living things. And Schweitzer seemed to be connected, maybe E.O. Wilson was influenced by him. 100 years ago, Schweitzer was connected to this principle, and in a hospital that he created in a place called Lambarine in Gabon, French Gabon, right next to, well, in the equatorial jungles of Africa, he put into practice this philosophy by helping out a people that were nothing like him. And so in 1914, imagine all this fire and rage that we hear about, racism and inequality and white supremacy and white privilege. And here's this white dude giving up his luxury down in equatorial Africa, that any day he could die from any number of illnesses. We live and want to go on living. This is something we share with everyone else that lives, everything else that lives, from elephants to blade of grass to human beings. This was his philosophy. And his life was an example, a remarkable life of dedicating to these principles that he believed in. And he, in his cause, his purpose, his silverback purpose was to give his knowledge and his skills to the jungle pygmies, I want to say. The jungle Congolese, equatorial African indigenous peoples. Albert Schweitzer gets a head nod from me. And Rachel Carson in the 60s, who became the mast of a sail of environmental movement as a scientist, tracing DDT, through the chain of biology in our oceans, our seas, and our rivers, into the animals that digest those and the birds that digest those animals. Rachel Carson dedicated her book to Albert Schweitzer. And the woman, Linda Hogan, the woman who watches over the world, one of the heroes, one of the women who watches over the world, who got the womanhood, knighthood blessing from Linda Hogan 50 years later, after her great work, after Rachel Carson's great work. Rachel Carson was knighted in Linda Hogan's work, and so the chain of goodness from human individuals is recognized and passed on and on and on and on, because we recognize these human beings. Aristarchus Aristides de Sousa Mendes, born July 19th, 1885 in Portugal, was presiding over the Portuguese consulate in French Bordeaux during World War II. Nazi Germany coming into France, the French Jews fleeing for their lives. 30 years De Sousa Mendes worked for this consulate, and he put his family's livelihood and his life and his job on the line, disobeying an order not to grant visas to the Jews who wanted safe passage into Portugal and Spain, and ultimately who went into North Africa. For 10 days, this guy worked around the clock with his staff, granting thousands, visas. And you have to keep in mind this was in the 1940s. Borders were huge. I went, my wife comes from France, and I met her in 1986. And if you didn't have your passport on you in France at the time, man, you were dust. If you got on a train and went into Germany, the passport police were everywhere. Borders was a big deal. So rewind that 40 years from when I was there, and here's this noble human being understanding that he's going to put his life aside for the lives of thousands of Jewish individuals that he'd never seen or met, and maybe would never see or meet again. And he was given a special award, special recognition in Israel decades later. But my point of this is, find your purpose, find the work that you need to provide for your family, and find that connection to your own purpose where you believe that what you're doing is adding to the good of the world. And by placing your energies into helping others who need whatever it is your contribution provides for them, and in doing so, you put aside your own suffering. The greatness of the human spirit is to put aside our own troubles and focus on the other. By focusing on the other, we take away from our own suffering. For example, well, I don't want to, I won't even go there. Look up those three individuals. Aristides de Sousa Mendes, Portuguese, Albert Schweitzer, French Alsace, Rachel Carson, United States. These are human beings who contributed to the goodness of the world, to put the environment, put nature, put human beings, put all living beings in a place of protective safety. E.O. Wilson, Half Earth, biophilia principle, consilience theory. Everything is connected to the web of life, and we need to preserve this web that nature has evolved and created over billions of years so that we can learn from it. Namaste.